Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the College Sports Hive. That is Leif and I am Scott Stevens. We're back with you on this Friday afternoon to bring you some college basketball action. We came to you early in the week on Monday and broke down a few of the games that would take place on Tuesday and Wednesday. They were fantastic basketball games, so we have some recaps of those to share with you. We'll give you some news in the middle as well, and then we have previews for some other really good games this weekend, two ranked matchups that you won't want to miss. We have a top two matchup. Number one is playing number two on Saturday, so that's almost can't miss television there for sure. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that preview and we'll give you some predictions of our Elite Eight of this preview again. Give you some picks. We'll start getting in the cycle of giving our top five teams, our team performance, our player performances, all those sorts of things, and our pick totals at the beginning of each week. So a lot of reset on Monday. So we'll have the results of our first preview as well as our second preview for each week for you on Monday's episode. So make sure to tune into that on Monday, and we'll make sure to get that all squared away for everyone there. Not really sure where it stands, but there's some amazing basketball games for sure. And so without further ado, we'll start in our recaps, and let's touch on Michigan State at Duke. First, Michigan State was able to pull out the win in Cameron Indoor Stadium and win 75-69. What did you make of this matchup?
It was a really intriguing matchup, and it didn't feel like either team played their best basketball. As it should be at this early in the season with inexperienced teams and all that's going on in the world right now. But my big takeaway was the more experienced team was able to win this game, and they started off really poorly. Michigan State, and then turned it around, and they dominated. Like 75-69 was the final score, but it wasn't that close at all for most of the second half. It was a lot of garbage time points. The Michigan State started off 3 of 15 with 6 fouls, 6 turnovers, and we're down big. And then Jalen Johnson for Duke got his second foul at the 9:44 mark, and that was the turning point in the game, in my opinion. Michigan State started picking it up before then, but then once he went out, Michigan State ended up going on a 13-2 run to close out the half at 37-31, and I think over the long spell they were down 8. Michigan State was down 18-9. And then ended up over a spell with a 45-23 run to go up 54-41 over the next 20 minutes or so of basketball, the kind of the middle chunk of the game. And you saw the more experienced team was able to prevail and play better basketball when the conditions weren't perfectly suited for either team, because neither team had played a really tough opponent with the same caliber athletes of them. And I think Michigan State's playing Notre Dame prior, giving them something close, really allowed them to grow and mentally, and they played better than the freshmen of Duke.
Yeah, it was a really interesting matchup for sure. Michigan State really dominated coming out of the half. They won an 11-3 run. Then they also held Duke with 8 points throughout 8 minutes of the second half. Some very good defense being played on the side of the Spartans as well. So what did you make of this Michigan State team? Were there any standout performances that you want to touch on?
I think my biggest thing is they have great depth, and we talked about that a little bit, but they proved it. They had 20 points from Rocket Watts, and we talked about how he had to play a really good game against the athletes of Duke, and he did, and he played a really good game. He's still adapting to the point guard role, being a lead guard rather than a kind of a combo guard, but as he's learning, he's going. Aaron Henry put it together. Like they talked about on broadcast that he's notorious for him and Izzo butting heads, and they love each other, but they have issues because Aaron Henry's so talented, but sometimes he doesn't put it all together. His stat line, he filled the stat line with 14 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 3 blocks, and without a true point guard in Cassius Winston, that was so important. And then off the bench, they had Malik Hall with a double-double, 10 and 10, and Julius Marble 5 of 5 from the field and 12 points. And they're big guys. And we talked about how Duke is trying to play smaller this year, and they punished them on the glass and made some big plays on the interior. And I thought that their depth proved pivotal in this game. And once Hauser and Kithier got in foul trouble, there was no drop-off from the Spartans, whereas when Jalen Johnson got in foul trouble, the Blue Devils looked lost.
Absolutely. You mentioned they out-rebounded Duke. That total was 46-40 in favor of the Spartans. They also shot a total of 43% from the field compared to Duke's 32%. So they were just a little bit more efficient as well in this one, especially in those runs where they went on and with it before the end of the first half, and then coming out of the gate in the second half strong. You talked about Jalen Johnson getting into foul trouble. How did this really hurt Duke, and how are they unable to kind of fill in the gap of him missing in this one?
Well, I think he's their most dynamic athlete, being a 6'10" small forward, power forward who's got ball handling capacity. On the defensive end, he allows you to grab a rebound and go down the floor and play at the pace that they were playing early in this game and facilitate, get down to the rim, kick out, and then, attack off the bounce off closeouts. And that's what Duke was doing. They were playing with incredible defensive intensity and then running the ball and getting easy shots. In the half court, they had no semblance of an offense. They really, really struggled, even when he was in the second half. But early in the game, he allowed the Blue Devils to get down the floor and score points in transition and isolations, which they absolutely lacked without him in. And also defensively, he provides a really good rebounder, which Julius Marble and Malik Hall off the bench especially hurt them.
For sure. Would you say you're concerned about this Duke team moving forward?
I think it's too soon to be concerned because, like I said, many of them are freshmen, including Jalen Johnson. You got Jeremy Roach and DJ Stewart are all super young. But I am concerned about the way they're being coached. I think, obviously, Coach K is a phenomenal coach, so that is no slight at him at all. I think that the way they played this game with us spread out with very few ball screens, and then when they did ball screen, there was no action off ball. I was a little concerned with their offensive sets. Defensively, they looked really good. The rotations were pretty sharp for a team that young. I'm sure I think they'll figure it out, but what a concern of mine was their production on the wings outside of Johnson. Wendell Moore was silent. DJ Stewart's a talented recruit. He scored 24 against Coppin State, but he was silent. And Jeremy Roach is a freshman point guard in the ACC. You're going to get a lot of games like this Michigan State team where there's veterans. So I am a little concerned at how they're going to get their scoring when Jalen Johnson's not playing his best.
It's going to be really interesting to see this Duke team moving forward in this one. Michigan State was able to pull out the win in Cameron, 75-69 there for the Spartans over the Blue Devils. Another fantastic matchup that followed that one was Kansas taking on Kentucky. This was a fantastic game, but it was also a little bit sloppy. We should mention the final score was 65-62 Kansas. They were able to pull it out at the end. What did you make of this matchup?
I think it was a similar takeaway. I think the more experienced team won. And in this game, the offense was even worse than the Duke-Michigan State game. Both teams really struggled to score, and eventually you saw experience prevail as they ran a few better sets, got a few more open looks, per se. Like, Kentucky wasn't taking bad shots necessarily, but they didn't take the best shots. One thing that stood out to me is Kentucky's defense is going to be a nightmare as the season goes on. Isaiah Jackson, I saw he ended up with 8 blocks, but in my head, I think he had 15. He changed at least 15 shots and blocked like 50. There was a bunch of jump balls. And then Kentucky will be good at scoring eventually. And they have the makeup to be a decent shooting team, but they've just really struggled shooting the ball. And then as for Kansas, Marcus Garrett was sick. You could tell he did not have coronavirus. For those of you guys watching, he tested negative twice before the game. There was concern there, but he wasn't right, and Kansas still found a way. And I think that's a testament to how well they're coached by Bill Self. He got them a win. And then Jalen Wilson, who is relatively unheralded for a Kansas Jayhawk type of guy, had an amazing game. He scored 23 points and 10 rebounds and super timely baskets, stretching Isaiah Jackson away from the rim. And I thought this was the better of the two Champions Classic games, even though the quality of offense was worse. It was just super competitive, and there was a lot of, like, you could see the coaches were changing their tactics really well, and both teams will be fine.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see. I think one of the more interesting things actually came at halftime was when Coach Calipari was doing his halftime interview, and he's like, "Man, you would have thought the only thing I didn't need to coach these guys how to do was score." So they're really struggling with their offensive side of the ball. They're playing super physical and up on you defense. They're super athletic, so it's very cool to see that. But they're just a little bit loose. They're not really playing coherently as of right now because they're all young. They're all coming into their first season. So I think they'll gel a little bit better as the season moves along. And they're going to be really scary once that starts to happen. They can continue to put up points, but it's still going to be a work in progress as far as it goes for Kentucky. Anything else that you wanted to mention about this one?
Well, I think with Kentucky, it comes every time that they get better as the season goes along. But I am concerned about their point guard play. I think Devin Askew, he reclassified, so he's 17, 18 playing against. Marcus Garrett was hurt this game, but he's the best defensive point guard in the country. So that's obviously not a nice matchup. And then I just worry that he's not able to facilitate due to physical maturity and maybe mental maturity too. And that's not a slight at Devin Askew. I just think that maturity in college basketball matters. And Coach Calipari is able to get such elite recruits that sometimes they can overplay it, but often a more experienced team wins, and especially early in the season, like Kansas. And then as for Kansas, I think we talked about they're slightly deprived of their usual talent, but I think this team understands who they are better than some other teams early in the season. And they played to their strengths, and they went to a 5-out and basically taking David McCormick out of the game, who is one of their coveted recruits that they still have. And they ended up winning this game with 5 guards in the game. And so I wonder if that's a trend that not only the Jayhawks will go, but all of college basketball kind of follow what the NBA has been doing. So I think that's really interesting. And both teams watch out for in March. Obviously, 2 blue bloods, they'll still be there.
Yeah, they're both very solid. They have the recruits, even though Kansas is struggling in that aspect, a little bit of things after the past few years. But like you said, they were able to do enough to win. They only shot 30% from the field and still able to win this game with Kentucky. So wait for Kentucky to mesh a little bit, and I think they're a team that you should really be on the lookout for. A team that is on everyone's radar as of right now is Gonzaga, the number 1 team in the country. They won again over a very tough, very physical West Virginia team, 87-82 here in this one. What did you make of this game before we talk about the Suggs ankle issue?
Well, I think it just plays hand in hand. I think the luxury that Andrew Nembhard brings of being available and eligible for Gonzaga after transferring from Florida is huge, because he can play with Suggs, he can play with anyone, and he's a very quality player. And with that injury, that was terrifying. He was able to carry the team when Suggs was out, and he had a great game with 19 points and 5 rebounds, 6 assists. And that's a great game. And he's probably the 4th or 5th best player on the team. And the top 2 guys for Gonzaga struggled. Drew Timme only had 17 points on 17 shots. You would expect that to be a losing effort, especially against a team like West Virginia, who's really good. And Gonzaga was still able to win. So that's my biggest takeaway, is just the luxury that they have of having so many good players, especially as a backup point guard that has started 2 years in the SEC.
Yeah, they're just so deep. And they have all the talent that they need to make this happen. One of the more impressive stats that stands out to me is they almost shot 50% from the field. So that's very impressive, and they were able to outscore a very talented West Virginia team. Let's flip the script and talk about West Virginia in this one. What did you make of that performance?
I think West Virginia was as we expected, except they played better initially. They shot the ball well in the first half, and they started to fade a little bit shooting wise down the second half. They have 2 bigs in Derek Culver and Oscar Tshiebwe that are 2 of the best bigs in the country, regardless of conference or anything. They're one of the best duos. If they can both stay on the floor at the same time, this team is a nightmare to play. Oscar Tshiebwe fouled out with a bit of time, and that's to be expected against Drew Timme. Like, he's going to get people in foul trouble. But Tshiebwe's fouled out in 3 of their 4 games so far. That's something to be concerned about. And then, as always, West Virginia's biggest issue is, can they get someone to hit perimeter shots? And the answer in this game was no. They had Sean McNeil, who's supposed to be their shooter, went 1 of 9, 1 of 6 from 3. Taz Sherman came in the game and provided a spark with 12 points, 3 of 9 from the field, but only 1 of 3 from 3. And then Miles McBride, who's their point guard, kind of combo guard, and he's a really good player. He's kind of like Rocket Watts. He's transitioning to play point guard now, and he has scored 10 points on 14 shots. So he has to be more efficient to help these bigs of West Virginia that will keep you in any game with their rebounding and defense alone.
Yeah, West Virginia showed a lot, in my opinion. I think they showed that they're able to compete and play with the best team in the country, and I do believe Gonzaga is that team as the best team in the country. So really cool to see here. It's a very interesting note to add here is Gonzaga's bigs. We'll preview this in a little bit, but Gonzaga's bigs and their upcoming matchup against Baylor, who's struggling with their interior defense a little bit. So that was one of the things we highlighted in this next recap that we'll do here with Baylor taking on Illinois. Illinois has a very talented big man as well. But that's going to be another thing to look out for once we get to that next preview. Any other final notes on Gonzaga at West Virginia?
I just wanted to highlight Joel Ayayi. He's like I said, we talk about Kispert, Suggs, and Timmy all the time, and him and Nemhard are fourth and fifth best on that team. But if you have a fourth and fifth player, best player, and Ayayi kind of being around there, who's kind of your glue guy. He plays really good defense, gets you steals, gets you rebounds. He's unselfish, and he paces you with 21 points on 10 of 15 shooting, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 steals. And one of the biggest plays in that game was Derek Culver comes down with a rebound. He tucks the ball, and Ayayi strips it, steals it, passes to Kispert. Kispert hits a 3, and now Gonzaga's up 7 rather than it being a 4 with West Virginia with the ball. And I just think they have a luxury of riches, and they all know their role so well. And it can be anyone scores 20 any night, and it makes them so dangerous. And then West Virginia is a legitimate Big 12 contender, even with Baylor and Kansas in the division. They've got the size, and if they can just get a semblance of shooting, they're a matchup no one wants in March, and no one wants to play in general.
I think that's really well put. All right, moving on to we touched on Baylor. Baylor did beat Illinois 82-69. This game was 31-30 at the half, so a truly dominant second half performance from Baylor in this one. What did you make? Excuse me. What did you make of this Baylor team? As they're now the second ranked team in the country with the matchup looming against Gonzaga?
I was extremely impressed. I was talking to my dad while watching the game. I thought this was at 31-30 at half. It's early in the season, but I was like, this is the best played game I've seen. And it wasn't the offense; it was the defensive intensity. They talked about how the bench had so much energy. It was infectious watching that game and how hard everyone was working, and the efficiency you felt like was going to come. They were just struggling making some shots early in the game. And Baylor's guards, they played 4 guards. And, the 2 least heralded guards on the team were the ones that paced them and scored. They had a transfer from Presbyterian. Adam Flagler scored 18 points off the bench. And then Davion Mitchell, who's more known for his defense, scored 15 points and had 7 assists to go along with Jared Butler and Maceo Teague's presence. Even though they didn't play that great, they could only combine for 23 points on 28 shots. I was extremely impressed by Baylor's defensive intensity, and then their ability to score in the second half was displayed. I felt like they just missed some shots in the first half, and they're a legitimate threat. Like I said, I apologized to them last time because I had them outside my top 5 because I was worried about their interior play, and they showed me that you don't need an interior play when your perimeter defense is as swarming as it was, or at least in that game it seemed that way.
Yeah, how do they kind of go about combating that lack of defense in the middle?
So they play to their strength of they're like, we don't have an interior shot blocker necessarily, so we're going to play a no middle defense, which means they're icing every ball screen, essentially forcing every screen to the outside and making him go away from the screen, which allows the defense to kind of zone up on the outside in the middle. And if they were to be beat, there would be help there. And it makes teams have to hit shots from the perimeter and then rotate off of those passes, and you have to be really sharp to beat a team like that. And their guards are phenomenal defensively, so it makes up for it. And we talked about Kofi Coburn's a behemoth of a man, but he had a negligible impact in this game because he had foul trouble early. And secondly, they wouldn't allow him to get into the ball screen and get the ball in the post. And Mark Vidal is a flat out dog on defense. He gets after it.
Yeah, Baylor impressive again. We did see Illinois competing early, though, 31-30 at the half. What do we make of this Illinois team moving forward? As they were ranked number 5 in this one, do we still think they're legit as that kind of a contender?
Yeah, no, I think they have some things to work on, and I think first and foremost they need to find a way to utilize Kofi Coburn's size, because not a lot of teams can match that. And I understand he's not the best pick and roll defender. But we've seen Udoka Azubuike become one of the defensive players of the conference and of the All-American defensive players last year, and they had a similar issue when he was young in his career. So I think they need to figure out how to use him more. And then I think with time, their freshman guards, the reason I chose Baylor in that game is because they had more experienced guards. But that doesn't mean that Illinois' guards aren't good at all. But this was their 3rd game and their 4th game against a high D1 opponent. Not to mention number 2 in the country. But they'll develop, and I really do think this team will be a top 10 team all season and crack the top 5 again at some point.
All right, that's Baylor taking down Illinois and remaining probably locked in there at the number 2 slot in the country, 82-69 the final in that one there. Let's move on to some news from the week. What do you have? What do you have for us here?
I think probably the biggest news so far is that Jalen Suggs tweaked his ankle, but came back in against West Virginia. It looked really bad. I was really worried it was his Achilles, and he looked to be in horrible pain. And he eventually came back in at the 15-minute mark of the second half. So that let's just start with some good news there. That was a sigh of relief.
Yeah, absolutely. It looked brutal. I'm not gonna lie. It looked like it was something. Like commentators, everyone was like, "Oh my, that could be a potentially nasty injury." So really good to see him come back in. What's the situation happening up at Syracuse? I hear they're having some COVID issues up there.
Yeah, so Syracuse head coach Jim Boeheim actually dealt with coronavirus earlier this summer. He said after their 75-45 victory that the positive test that didn't allow a lot of players to play belonged to a walk-on, and clarified that the 5 players, including his son Buddy Boeheim, will have to sit out 14 days because of contact tracing. Boeheim also added that more than 600 COVID-19 tests have been given to their team, and there have been just 2 positives. And the Orange are 2-0 and next scheduled to host Rider on Saturday, but they will be without those 5 players.
Interesting developments up there. It's very impressive. 600 tests so far is quite a substantial number, and only 2 positives. So it doesn't seem to be a huge issue. It just seemed to be a individualized attack there due to COVID-19, and unfortunately, those 5 players will have to sit out and ensure that over that 14-day period, they're not developing symptoms, and making sure that everything's all squared away there to avoid a potential outbreak, which could make the team miss time. So good to know that it's not necessarily a huge issue as some of the football teams we've seen so far this season. What do you make of Louisville, and why are they in our news for you?
Louisville's been off to a great start, but they had to pause activities and called off the UNC Greensboro game that was supposed to happen this afternoon. We don't know if there were positive tests with players or someone on the staff, but they figured better safe than sorry, and I agree with their thinking there. You really hope that their team stays healthy though, because they got off to a really good start for a team that had some lower expectations for a program that typically has such high expectations.
Yeah, that's a shame. They were carrying me in my picks against you. So unfortunate there for Louisville. Hopefully everything's squared away in the program there, and we'll look for more news and furthering developments in that story as we go along into next week. Richmond is another team that had to pause team activities after defeating a huge win over Kentucky, sliding them into the top 10, and they haven't played since. Do you know anything else about what's happening up there in Richmond, or is that kind of the whole scoop that we got so far?
Yeah, I think the day after they defeated Kentucky, they were traveling to go host an event, and they decided because of positive tests somewhere within the undisclosed who or a player, staff, or anyone involved with the program, someone had a positive test. They decided to call off the event and their hosting game, and they've paused activity. And I haven't heard any updates since, but I'm really hopeful that this Richmond team can get back without too much of a hiccup, because like we saw against Kentucky, that they had a lot of talent as well as experience, and that equates to success in college basketball.
Joel Intambwe of Texas Tech leaves the program. I swear you put that on there just to trip me up. No, Joel Intambwe leaves the Texas Tech program. What do we make of this move and that transfer?
It's interesting because they're a team that like Baylor doesn't have a lot of bigs. They're really good defensively, and ironically enough, they play the same no middle defense, which allows them not to play with a lot of bigs. But he was someone that could have provided them spacing and a rim protector, which is very rare in college basketball. My understanding was he was unhappy with his playing time early in the season, as he was a transfer from UNLV, and he didn't love his playing time, and he decided, I don't want to be here for this if I'm not playing. And sometimes you don't know the full story, so it doesn't sound great there, but that's all I've heard, and we'll see how it impacts the Red Raiders.
Yeah, interesting developments there. Garza for Iowa is another 30-point first half. What do you make of those performances in 2 back-to-back first halves?
I watched the one last night, and it was dominant. Like, the team they were playing wasn't great. I'll give them that, but but he rim runs. Like for a guy as big as he is, he runs the floor super well, gets open, and they have great passers. He gets the ball in good positions, and it's not all layups. He had a step back like left corner fadeaway. He's the favorite for National Player of the Year in my eyes, and everyone, if you haven't watched Luka Garza, give him a watch.
Speaking of giving it a watch, we'll now move into our previews for this week. And number 1, Gonzaga is 3-0 on their year. Number 2, Baylor also 3-0 on their year. Marquee as it gets to open up the college basketball year. You have the number 1 team in the land taking on the number 2 team in the land. Bankers Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern time on CBS. Where else would you want to be other than watching this one?
Maybe I'll be glued to the couch. You know that.
Yeah, I know you won't be anywhere else other than parked in front of this game for sure. So we talked about the potential injury to Suggs for Gonzaga. If he isn't able to go for some reason, even though he came back into the game in the second half, and even if he's limited at all, do we think that hinders Gonzaga? We touched on their depth. We touched on people rising to the occasion, and if so, who do we think is going to step up to fill that role?
Well, I think it really would hinder them just because he brings this unique – Gonzaga always plays a run and gun style because they have a really good team around who they have. And then they've got talent. They pass the ball really well. They run, and they hit threes. But what Suggs brings that's different to them, which is why I think everyone in the land is like, wow, this team is dangerous, not just a typically really good Gonzaga team, is he brings some elite level athleticism that has never been at Gonzaga. They've had good point guards. They've had Nigel Williams-Goss. They've had so many players that are solid. And Andrew Nembhard fits that solid mold, and he will be able to keep them competitive in this type of game, even against a really good Baylor team. But I think Suggs' athleticism, if he's 100%, would allow for them to penetrate the middle against the no-middle defense with so many guards and just compromise a defense more so than any player other than himself can do. So they'll be competent, and the person to step up to address the other part of your question is Andrew Nembhard, and he's a very, very good backup. And he will play a ton of minutes even if Suggs is playing, but he just doesn't have the burst that Suggs has. And I think that would make a big difference. And I think Baylor, if Suggs is limited, Baylor really has a great chance to win this game.
Do you think Baylor is in jeopardy of not being able to kind of run that defensive strategy that they like to implement with the no interior attack against this Drew Timme, and for Gonzaga they're big?
I think they're going to have to really work. I think they have to not allow him to catch it deep because that will compromise everything. I think they have to wall up and make him earn his catches, as well as not let him rim run. He like Garza, gets down the floor and catches a ball on the transition. He's so nimble and so skilled. He'll finish with his right or his left hand in transition. But Baylor has to be extremely astute and say, hey, we can't allow them to run and get easy buckets, because that's how Gonzaga scores. I mean, you mentioned they were nearly 50% and scored 87 points in what was considered like, oh, they struggled. Like they still scored 87 points on 50% shooting against a really good West Virginia team. And I think Baylor has to realize, like, where did those points come from? And many of them were in transition. So they have to keep Timme out of the middle in his catches in order to keep that. And then Suggs not being 100%, because I know he was able to play, but he didn't look right afterwards. Not being 100% really will help them keep players out of the paint.
Other than the defensive side of the ball, what do you think Baylor needs to do on offense to be able to score with this Gonzaga team that you know is going to put up points at a pretty consistent clip?
Well, I think Baylor, it's really important for them to establish their own pace. Like I said, they don't want to run and gun with Gonzaga. I don't think anyone in the country does. I think that Baylor needs to be patient and continue to shoot the three ball well. Baylor has shot they've made 11.7 3-pointers per game this season, which is 8th best among Division I teams. And then they're 47% from three through 3 games. So obviously, if you shoot those type of numbers, making about 12 threes on 47%, you have a very good chance of winning. And that will still remain true against Gonzaga. So I think they need to be patient, drive and kick. I don't think Gonzaga's elite defensively. They're just superb offensively. So if they can control the pace and then score still, this makes this game conducive to Baylor. And I'm sure Scott Drew, the head coach of Baylor, who's back from coronavirus, he coached against Illinois, is very well aware of his friend Mark Few's, head coach of Gonzaga's, tendencies to want to run. So I think that's a really interesting coaching matchup of how each team prepares their team to handle the pace the other likes to play.
I know you're a big matchups guy. You believe in matchups can dictate portions of this game. Do you think there's a matchup in particular that's going to stand out in this one? If someone can win this matchup, they might have a great chance of winning the game.
Well, yeah, I think it starts with Drew Timme. I think if Drew Timme can, I think he'll be more involved than Kofi Coburn was. I think he's a more skilled player and a better player at this point in his career. But if Drew Timme versus JTT and Mark Vital, I mean, Vital is an amazing defender, but he's only 6'6". So this is why it's imperative to keep Timme out of the paint. I think if he's forced to dribble in, then he may struggle. If he's able to just use hook shots and stuff, he's got phenomenal touch, phenomenal footwork. I think he could really thrive. So I think that matchup of the interior of Drew Timme versus the bigs of Baylor, which are not big guys, is really important. And then I think just the guard play in general. I think Baylor plays 4 guards and Gonzaga has a lot of really good guards who can produce more steals, more runouts, get some easy baskets, and then just who controls the pace better, which is always upon the guard to control. So I think a nice matchup is kind of the 4 guards of Baylor versus the 3 of Gonzaga. And I know that's pretty a lot of the players, but this is the type of game that everyone has to win their matchups, or you have to win at least 3 of the 5 of the players on the floor to win, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me in this one, at least, because to hear you talk about it and seeing as a team like Baylor who's struggling with their identity inside with big men, it would seem to benefit them to be able to get out and run and score and transition and play that fast style of game if they don't necessarily have the bigs inside. But it's interesting to hear you say that that's probably not the strategy that they want to implement against this Gonzaga team, just because they're probably one of the best teams in the country at being able to get up and down the floor and score in transition, right?
I think you're absolutely right. I'd say against almost any other team, I'd want Baylor to play quick. But against Gonzaga, that gives Gonzaga so much space. They shoot at such a high clip because they take great shots and then they get win in transition. So I think you're right that in most cases, if you have this type of matchup where Gonzaga does have a true big in Drew Timme, and the other team doesn't, you'd want to outrun him off the floor. But I think Gonzaga is against conventional wisdom just because of the talent they possess offensively, and that does thrive in transition. And the one thing I think is really important is they just need to keep getting production from their bench. And Adam Flagler, I talked about, is actually pacing Baylor in terms of scoring off the bench, a transfer from Presbyterian. And he's scoring actually, Jared Butler scoring 16.3, so he's leading them. But Adam Flagler is scoring 15.7 points per game. And then they have 4 guards scoring north of 13 points per game. So Baylor has the ability to score with Gonzaga. And if they control the pace in this game, I think they can score better in the half court against a mediocre Gonzaga defense compared to Gonzaga's incredible offense that thrives in the open court versus a great Baylor set defense.
So essentially, it's almost just like limiting Gonzaga's possessions up and down the floor. The amount of times they can get out in transition and run, and keeping the ball in the half court and using some of the shot clock is as good a way to do it as any if they can consistently beat that Gonzaga D. This is going to be just a phenomenal matchup here on Saturday afternoon. It's gonna make me turn off the football television and put on some college basketball. So that doesn't happen very often. So for everyone out there, make sure to tune into this game. It's a potential national championship highlight game. Two of the teams that you'll see deep into the March Madness tournament and all of that stuff. So please do make sure to tune into this one. Number 1 Gonzaga taking on number 2 Baylor. 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. You have anything else to add here before we move on to our next preview?
I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is the national championship. These two, in my eyes, so far, I've watched all the top teams play, and they've been the 2 most impressive. And obviously, things can change, but I think anytime you have as good of guard play as both teams have here, and then just the ability to produce offensively and defensively as both teams do, that this is an elite matchup. I really think that you need to watch this game if you're a fan of college basketball. And or just a fan of any sport, because this is the best thing on TV, even over all the football games on Saturday.
Absolutely. I don't think I could agree more. We'll move on to another sneaky good matchup, a top 25 matchup. Number 12, Villanova is traveling to number 17, Texas. Texas is a team that's really surprised me so far this year under head coach Shaka Smart. They're just so athletic, man. They're so long and lengthy, and they're able to run up and down the floor. They play such hard defense. I remember when Shaka Smart had the teams that he took into the national into the March Madness tournament and the brackets and everything like that. That's what they pride themselves on, is playing hard defense, being able to be just up and down the floor. We're more in shape than you, and all of these things. So I think it's something that you're clearly seeing so far this year in this Texas team, who's now 4-0 after winning the Maui Invitational. So and beating North Carolina. So some pretty interesting stuff here. What do you make of this game between Villanova and Texas?
This is a really intriguing game because Texas is phenomenal defensively, and Villanova is, as usual, very good offensively. They move the ball really well, and Texas, I watched them play Indiana, who is another team I'm pretty high on. I think Indiana's a really good basketball team, and they absolutely shut them down. So the big matchup here, and I'll kind of jump the gun and talk about the individual matchup off the top. I think Jeremiah Robinson Earl is an All-American candidate, and then they've got the freak athletes on the front line of Texas, and there's so many of them. You have Kai Jones, you have Greg Brown, Jericho Sims, Royce Ham. You got just a surplus of them, and Texas didn't let Trace Jackson Davis of Indiana, who is an All-American candidate, do anything. He really struggled finishing over them, and I think that this matchup will dictate the game. If they limit Jeremiah Robinson Earl, I think it's too much for the rest of the Villanova team, who is not quite as talented as they have been in the last few years, to try to score so much against such an aggressive, athletic bunch in Texas. And that's a huge matchup in this game, especially because Texas has 11 of 12 players from last season that played minutes, and their top 11 guys returning. And then the only person that they add to their 12-man roster basically was a 5-star, number 10 recruit in the class, Greg Brown. So I don't think they're lacking for talent, and Shaka Smart's got a really good bunch.
Yeah, they've just been uber impressive to me, at least. Matt Coleman leading the way for that team with 16.3 points per game. What do we make of Villanova? It's a team that I haven't really heard a ton of. What do they need to essentially do to ensure that they're able to run with this Texas team?
Well, I think Villanova is extremely well coached by Jay Wright. They'll play slow and they'll play to their tempo. I think Texas will want to run in this game, use their athleticism, play Shaka Smart's chaos-heavy style. I think that Villanova's got a really good guard in Colin Gillespie, and him and Jeremiah Robinson Earl will have to be played some of the best games of their careers in this one to win, because Villanova has help. They've got capable players. They've got 2 other guys, Justin Moore and Caleb Daniels, scoring over 13 points a game. But I don't think those guys are prolific scorers as they've had as third scorers in the past. And they'll need to be really good in this game because of the amount of defensive pressure on Gillespie and Robinson Earl provided by Texas's athletes and depth. And then as for Villanova's style, I think they have to play even slower and more meticulously than they typically do, which is nice. They jump stop, they pass out. I mean, it's a beauty to watch as someone who really likes fundamental basketball. Villanova does it better than anyone, but they're going to have to knock down a ton of threes because of the interior of Texas. They just don't let you in there. So you're going to have to jump stop, kick out, and shoot a high percentage. And I'm not sure that Villanova has the guys to blow away a team like this in the past that they used to would beat with their defense and execution on offense. I don't know if they have the team that can just outrun and gun you as they used to. And so they'll have to play slower than they typically do.
Any other keys to the game that you got for us?
I think Robinson Earl has to be very smart about how he plays offensively and defensively. He can't get any silly fouls because he's so key against those bigs. If he can get them in foul trouble, or if he gets in foul trouble, I think that's a really big one. And then Texas only allows 3 3-point makes a game, and Villanova averages about 13. So that is something's got to give there. And Texas allows you to shoot about 20% from three, and Villanova shoots about 37% from three. So upper echelon on both sides of the ball there. And I think whoever kind of gets the better end of that stick should win this game.
Yeah, I think another thing that's going to stand out here is Texas's depth in a little bit versus a little bit lack thereof in terms of Villanova on that side of things. They just have so many guys that they can just plug into places and just they don't lose their athletic nature. These guys just keep coming in from the bench, scoring points, getting solid minutes, playing hard defense, and it's just the breed of basketball that Shaka Smart institutes up there in wherever he goes. But also, with that being said, it's a great coaching matchup because Jay Wright does it better than anyone else. So he's another tremendous coach. And anything else to add in this game before we move into our Elite Eight of the week?
I think this Texas team is one of the, like, people may think this is a shock that they're very good. I think they've got a team that can pose problems to the big boys. I think similar in the Big 12 to West Virginia, we talked about having length and size to really present problems for Kansas and Baylor. I think Texas is one of those teams as well. And Villanova, I wouldn't say they're out there, they should be really worried yet, but I think that they need some solid performances because even in wins, they haven't been horribly convincing, in my opinion, and they were upset by Virginia Tech. So I wonder if they're going to have a comeback game and really establish themselves as the blue blood that they are becoming and have been.
All right, that's going to be Texas and Villanova in another tremendous top 25 matchup for this Saturday. That's going to be the games that we preview for you for tomorrow, essentially. We'll be back with more previews on Monday. But before we sign off for the week in college basketball, let's hit up the Elite Eight of the week. We got 8 games to pick for you. We're going to start things off with Wisconsin at Marquette. Who you got there? I want to hear your analysis on some of these before I make my picks. I'm going to cheat the system a little bit.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. I'm not doing so hot in these picks so far, but in this one, I've got Wisconsin. I think that they've got bigs and they're very experienced. Similar to Texas, they bring back all their main contributors. They've got a really good guard play in Brad Davison and Demetric Trice, and their bigs of Micah Potter and Nate Reavers are very solid. And I think Marquette has more moving parts. So I'm going to trust the experience, even though it is on the road. It is a true road game. I don't know exactly how the fan situation is playing at Marquette, which is a Big East school. But I think that Wisconsin has the veterans that even if there were to be some fans, that they won't be horribly disturbed by it. And assuming that they're healthy, which in 2020 is a bold assumption, but I haven't heard anything otherwise. I like this Wisconsin team as they're one of the better teams in the country. Well,
in my infinite wisdom, I said I wanted to hear your analysis first, so I'm just going to go against you. Wow, that makes total sense. I'll go Marquette at home. I not a ton of knowledge on either side here for Wisconsin or Marquette. Marquette's just a blue blood basketball school. They always have a good runs into the tournament. So I'm going to roll with Marquette and just go against you because why not?
They have talent. They definitely have talent. This is on the betting lines. I looked at it. This is a 3.5 point spread. So it's certainly nothing ridiculous there.
We love to hear it. All right, moving on to number 21, Oregon taking on Seton Hall in Omaha. Who you got in this one?
I don't know. I picked Seton Hall against Louisville. They got very close. I love Sandro Mamukelashvili. He's probably one of my favorite players. One, he's got a great name, and two, he's a stretch big. That left-handed, he's silky smooth. I really like their team. And Oregon played one game, and they got beaten by a pretty poor Missouri team, in my opinion. They did just get a transfer in LJ Figueroa. I learned that after I prepared the documents. So there's some excess news for you guys. Transfer from St. John's. He's a really good player, but they are missing Will Richardson, who's their point guard, who is tasked with replacing Peyton Pritchard. I'm going to go with Seton Hall. I don't feel confident in this pick, but I think that they've played 4 games. They've got a big that can match up with N'Faly Dante for Oregon, and I love Sandro Mamukelashvili. So let's go Seton Hall. Come on, Kevin Willard and co. Give me a win.
I love it for sure. I'm going to roll with Oregon, though. I know they're trying to replace a lot without Peyton Pritchard. He was one of the better talents in the Pac-12. I just trust Dana Altman and company to kind of ensure that they don't go on a 2-game slide. You said it before we started this, there's no way that Oregon loses twice, or you've heard somewhere that there's no way Oregon loses twice. I kind of do agree with that. They're going to be a little motivated and a little bit angry after that loss earlier on in their season. So I'm going to roll with Oregon and hope for the best, even though they didn't look so good in their first game. And Seton Hall's coming off a couple good games, even though they've lost a few.
Yeah, no, I think Oregon, just for the betting line thing, this is another one that's very close. Oregon's a 3-point favorite in that game. And I think that they're deserving of it. Dana Altman's a phenomenal coach. He wins wherever he goes. And I think Peyton Pritchard's just a lot to replace super soon without a guard playing. So I'm banking on a Seton Hall team that's lost in some heartbreakers.
I love it. We'll go back and forth all day. All right. I think we have the same one on this one, unless you go changing on me. But NC State versus UConn.
I really don't know who I was going to take in this one. I think I'm going to go with NC State because they have a good combination of bigs and guards that do well. UConn just beat USC, who's a really talented team who plays two big guys. I think NC State, because they've played in the ACC and returned a lot of players from that team, and they bring in an impact freshman in Cam Hayes. I think that they will have enough talent to get it done, and I think another great name, DJ Funderburk, is gonna have a good game. So I'm gonna go with, and then Manny Bates is a shot blocking machine in the middle for the Wolfpack. So I'm gonna go with the Wolfpack, and hopefully Jim Valvano, which we talked about, Jimmy V Week, is going to carry this Wolfpack team.
Yeah, I'm going to go NC State as well. That UConn win over USC is very scary, though, because USC just flat out trounced BYU, and we both picked BYU to win. So that's a little scary. But with that being said, I'll just roll with NC State and see what happens there in Bubbleville. All right, UCF at Michigan. Who you got in this one?
I'm going with Michigan. I don't think UCF has the talent they've had in a few past years. They have a good coach in Johnny Dawkins, but I think Juwan Howard and Michigan, they've got really good wings and emerging guards and centers. So, I mean, Isaiah Livers was the key to that Michigan team. When he was healthy last season, they were a really good team. They won the Bahamas. They have Franz Wagner, the little brother of Mo Wagner, and they have talent all around. They're just figuring out how to play together with some new pieces. I like this Michigan team in the long run, so I think they're going to start figuring it out after a few subpar games to start the season.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Michigan as well. I just think it's one of those programs that's built to play basketball as well. They're really struggling this year in football, so this would be a terrible pick. UCF over Michigan over UCF if we're doing football, but we're not. This is college basketball, so I'm going to go with the Wolverines to kind of right the ship a little bit against this UCF team. Oklahoma at TCU. Who you got in this one?
This is a weird one. TCU has been really good on defense so far in this year. They beat a pretty solid Liberty team in a close one. They replaced a lot. They lost Desmond Bain, who he was kind of the heartbeat of their team. He was picked in the first round. And then as for Oklahoma, they haven't been great since they lost Trae Young, and even then they weren't phenomenal. But I'm going to go with Oklahoma. They have Brady Manick. They played their first game the other day, so TCU's actually played some more games. But Oklahoma proved they can score. Brady Manick scored 30. He's a stretch four. They've got Kirk Queth, who's a big man who can reject some shots. They got Austin Reeves, who'll score off the bounce. I like this Oklahoma team to be kind of a surprise team, someone that a lot of the big guys don't really want to play in the Big 12. Because they have scoring ability. And I think their ability to score will outweigh TCU's solid defense without a potency on offense.
Yeah, I think you said it best there with the offense over defense in this one. I'm going to go Oklahoma as well and just roll with the punches and I'll just say for all the reasons that you said. How about that? All right, Xavier at Cincinnati. Who do you have in this game?
It is a true toss-up, but this is one of the best rivalries in college basketball, in my opinion. You've got Duke and Carolina, which is, I think, easily number one. I don't think that's really that debated. But behind that, this one's actually got some really bad blood. There was a legitimate fight that happened in this one a couple years ago. But both coaches, Mick Cronin is now at UCLA, and Chris Mack's now at Louisville. So they've replaced both coaches. I think they've lost a little bit of animosity. This is being played at Cincinnati. Xavier has been fairly mediocre this year, but they are 5-0. I'm going to go with Cincinnati. I think they just have struggled a little bit early and are going to turn it around in a rivalry game. They're a little more comfortable at home, come out juiced with energy. And this Xavier team has eked out a few games that shouldn't have been close.
I do want to just say I want to pick Cincinnati just because of football, because they haven't let us down yet so far in the year. But this isn't football. This is college basketball. I'll roll with Xavier. They're 5-0 in the year. I know they are traveling to Cincinnati, but I don't think that'll be too big of a deal for them. I know it's a rivalry game. They're going to be ready to go regardless of what's happening there. I'll roll with Xavier to try and improve to 6-0 in this one. So go ahead. Did you have something to say?
I was going to say I am trying to find the line for that one, but it hasn't been announced yet. I'd bet that the Xavier pick is the one that Vegas is siding with, though, is what I was going to say.
Oh, baby. We're rocking and rolling. We're rocking and rolling. All right. With that being said, we've arrived at our games of the week and what games they are. We'll start off with number 12, Villanova. They're traveling to number 17, Texas. Who you got in this one, and tell me why.
See, the weird part is I thought I was taking the upset here and taking Texas, but you have that as well. And I don't like betting against Villanova. It's kind of like betting against the Patriots when they had Bill Belichick. Villanova just churns out wins. That said, I don't think that Villanova early in this season has been great. And I'm going to go with Texas. This could very easily bite me in the butt, but I think Texas has the length to really disturb Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, which would take away most of their inside scoring, and then they'd have to shoot phenomenally from three. And Texas has been great at not allowing threes so far in this year. So I think that based on that, I'm going to take Texas in a really close one. I would not be surprised if it goes the other way, and I'd assume that Villanova might be the favorite according to the lines. I'm not really sure. But I'm going to go Texas 71-68. I think it'll be fast-paced but really well-defended game. And I eventually going to say that Jeremiah Robinson-Earl has to work too hard to get his points, and that is too much of what Villanova does. So I'm going to go with Texas and just the experience and continuity of that team returning all their players.
Yeah, I like you said, I'm going to go Texas as well in this one, and it's interesting because Villanova's lost already this year to Virginia Tech, and I personally think that Texas is a more athletic team than Virginia Tech is. So far this season, I don't think there's been a team that's really wowed me the way, aside from Baylor and Villanova and Gonzaga. I don't think there's been a team that's really been like surprised me as much as Texas has so far. They run up and down the floor. They're aggressive. They're well coached too. They're disciplined. They don't like just run around fouling people. They're just super aggressive and they put up points too. So I'm going to roll with Texas in this one over Villanova. I know it's hard to bet against Jay Wright and company there, but I'll roll with Texas. I'm going to go a little bit higher scoring than you are. I'm going to go 88-72. I think Texas can really put it up, and if they get on a run, watch out.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, they're defensively elite. Like I'm confident in saying that they're defensively elite. And I wouldn't be too surprised if they end up getting a big lead in this game. I just trust Villanova to keep it close. Like I don't want to disrespect Jay Wright and company too much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably a little bit too wide of a gap, but that's just the impression talking, and I think for a little bit of early on this year. All right. With that being said, the best matchup that will happen in the regular season, and personally, in my opinion, is number 1 Gonzaga taking on number 2 Baylor. Who you got in this one?
I love Gonzaga, but I think I'm going Baylor. I think Baylor is more experienced with the team that they have. Gonzaga has some new pieces in Jalen Suggs, and Jalen Suggs I'm not certain is 100%. He didn't look 100% in the second half, and against Baylor, I think he absolutely needs to be 100% because, I talked about Andrew Nembhard being such a luxury of a player to have behind Suggs, but I don't think he provides the same dynamism Suggs has. And against Baylor, you need that athleticism to get you some of those free points in transition. You need his athleticism, his pick and roll playmaking, going downhill, using some of Drew Timme's screens. And I think he's the only guy on Gonzaga's team that has that type of elite athleticism. And then as for Baylor, they have 4 guards that are so good defensively. Like I was wowed by the defense they played so high on the court too, not allowing Ayo Dosunmu, who's one of the 5 best players in college basketball, do anything. He was 6 for 18. We didn't mention that. He was 6 for 18 scoring 18 points on 18 shots against that type of team. If he struggles like that, I think a hobbled Jalen Suggs may struggle as well. I don't like picking against Gonzaga because I love watching them and everything. But I think Baylor did enough to impress me, and the interior matchup of Drew Timme versus JTT and Mark Vidal will determine this matchup. But I'm gonna trust the experience of Baylor to beat Gonzaga without a 100% Jalen Suggs. So I'm gonna go with 84-77 Baylor.
Bold. It's a bold one, but I love it. I do think Baylor competes in this game for sure. I think it's a lot easier to speed up the pace of play of a game rather than it is to continue to not allow a team to run on you and get out in transition. And I just think with Baylor, they have to play a super, super complete game, not turn the ball over a ton, really hold the ball a little bit longer than I think they want to. And so going against that kind of identity without having a big presence in the middle against a true solid battle-tested big man in Drew Timme, I'm going to go with Gonzaga just to be able to exploit that matchup in the middle a little bit better than Illinois could. And Illinois kept that competitive for a half at least. So I'll roll with Gonzaga. I don't think they'll blow them out of the water any stretch of the imagination. It's going to be a tremendous game, but I just think they're going to be able to make the plays down the stretch they need to with exposing a little bit lack of height, lack of things like that, and be able to get out and score a little bit more points than Baylor will be able to, going against the grain of trying to slow the pace down when they seem to want to run a little bit more. So I'll go Gonzaga, 87-81 final for me.
I like that pick. I think Gonzaga with Jalen Suggs in this game, I think I'd take Gonzaga. He is playing in, to all accounts. I just don't think that the way he looked to be in such tremendous pain, and then what I saw when he came back, he had a presence on the floor. He just didn't have the dynamism that makes him so special and makes this Gonzaga team so special offensively, in my opinion. And I thought the defense of Baylor was almost more impressive than the offense of Gonzaga that I've seen through 3 games. So I'll trust that, but I would not be surprised at all if you're right on that one. And I do think these are the 2 best teams in the country, and whoever wins this game, and whoever loses it, I think will still be number 2 in the country. I don't think that they're going to fall behind 3 to number 3. I think this loss is like, oh, whatever, you're still number 2, or you move from 1 to 2. Yeah. So this is must-watch TV, everyone. Please, give it a listen. Let us know if you've got any predictions for this game that we're missing. We're really curious to see what you think.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be just a tremendous game here between Gonzaga and Baylor. Make sure to tune in, everyone, and it'll be acceptable. I'll allow it to turn off college football to watch this basketball game. It's must-see TV. So make sure to tune in. That's going to do it for Leif and I on this episode of the College Sports Hive. We're going to be coming back to you on Sunday to do some college football recapping of what happened over the weekend. I've made some bold predictions, so let's see what happens. I'm very excited. But also Monday will be another basketball episode to delve into what happened this weekend and preview some more games for you next week. So that's going to do it for Leif and I. Leif, anything else to say before we sign off?
I think you got it covered. Watch some basketball, watch some football. Let us know what you think, and let us know if you have any games you want us to preview for basketball or football. We're more than happy to, and we love interacting with you guys. So let us know and have a good weekend.
Absolutely. College football kind of winding down, college basketball getting into the swing of things. So it's a great time of the year, to say the least. So that's going to do it for us. We will see you all on Sunday, and stay safe and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.